My name is Barbara Wilson and I'm 58 years old. Today was supposed to be one of the proudest moments of my life, watching my daughter Sophia graduate college. Instead, as we sat in the audience waiting for her name to be called, my husband of 35 years leaned over and whispered, "I'm leaving you." I noticed his young coworker Natalie sitting a few rows back smiling at him. What Richard didn't know was that I'd been prepared for this moment for months, and I had a special envelope waiting just for him. Before I tell you what happened next and how I handed him that envelope, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever faced betrayal but found strength you didn't know you had. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, the kind where everyone knows your business, and high school sweethearts often end up married. That was exactly what happened with Richard and me. We met in our junior year when we were paired as lab partners in chemistry class. The irony isn't lost on me. We definitely had chemistry back then. Richard was handsome, ambitious, and seemed different from the other boys. He talked about leaving our small town, making something of himself in the financial world. I was drawn to his dreams and determination. We dated throughout high school and decided to attend the same college so we could stay together. Those early years weren't easy. We both worked part-time jobs while carrying full course loads. I waitressed at a local diner while Richard worked nights at a gas station. Sometimes we'd go days barely seeing each other, but we were building toward something together. At least that's what I believed. After graduation, Richard got his first job at a financial firm in Chicago. It wasn't a glamorous position, but it was a foot in the door. I supported his career by taking a teaching job at a local elementary school, even though I had opportunities to pursue a master's degree. Back then, I didn't mind putting my ambitions second. Richard promised that once he was established, it would be my turn to chase my dreams. 2 years into our marriage, I became pregnant with Sophia. Richard was thrilled, but also stressed about finances. I worked until my 8th month of pregnancy, saving every penny we could. After Sophia was born, I took only 6 weeks of maternity leave before returning to the classroom. My mother moved in temporarily to help with childcare, allowing Richard to focus on climbing the corporate ladder. 3 years later, our son Michael was born. By then, Richard had received his first significant promotion. We moved to a larger apartment, and life became a bit easier financially. But the pattern was set. Richard's career always took priority, while I managed our home and children, teaching full-time and handling everything domestic. When Sophia was 10, Richard received an opportunity to join a prestigious investment firm in Boston. It meant uprooting our family, but he convinced me it would be our big break. I resigned from a school I loved and moved the children away from their friends and my support system. In Boston, I quickly found another teaching position, though at a lower salary and less desirable school. Over the next decade, Richard's career flourished. He became a senior partner at his firm, and our financial situation improved dramatically. We bought a beautiful colonial home in an upscale suburb. We took family vacations to Europe. The children attended excellent schools. From the outside, we were living the American dream. 7 years ago, I was offered a position as assistant principal. It would have meant longer hours, but also significant professional advancement for me. Richard convinced me to turn it down, arguing that the children needed stability at home since he was traveling so frequently. Looking back, that was a turning point in our marriage. I surrendered a piece of myself I never got back. About 2 years ago, I started noticing changes in Richard. He began working later, going on more business trips, buying new expensive clothes. At first, I didn't think much of it. He was 57, perhaps going through some sort of midlife refresh. But then other signs appeared that something wasn't right. I found receipts for restaurants I'd never been to, noticed unfamiliar charges on our credit card for hotel rooms in Boston when he claimed to be out of town. Once I picked up his suit jacket to take to the dry cleaners and caught the scent of a perfume I didn't recognize. The evidence kept mounting, but I kept making excuses. Richard became increasingly critical of my appearance. After 30 years of marriage, he suddenly had opinions about my hairstyle, my clothes, even my weight. He complained about my cooking, the way I kept the house, how I spent money, though I had always been the frugal one. These criticisms hurt, but I tried to adapt, thinking I could somehow fix whatever was broken between us. 6 months before Sophia's graduation, I finally gathered the courage to confront Richard. I chose a calm evening when the children weren't home. I laid out my concerns carefully, asking if there was someone else. Richard became immediately defensive, accused me of spying on him, then laughed and said I was being paranoid and insecure. He told me I was imagining things, that I was creating problems because I was bored with my life. That night, after he'd gone to sleep, I sat alone in our kitchen and made a decision. I wouldn't confront him again. I would get proof. The next day, I contacted a private investigator recommended by a colleague who had gone through a similar situation. It wasn't a decision I made lightly, considering both the cost and what it said about the state of our marriage. 2 weeks later, the investigator confirmed my worst fears. Richard was having an affair with Natalie Parker, a 29-year-old financial analyst who had joined his firm the previous year. The investigator provided photos of them entering hotels, dining at expensive restaurants, even walking hand in hand in a park. In one particularly painful image, Richard was kissing Natalie outside her apartment building, looking happier than I had seen him in years. I spent the next week crying in my car during lunch breaks at school, unable to process the betrayal. 35 years of marriage, 2 children, countless sacrifices, and this was how he repaid my loyalty. I considered confronting him immediately, but Sophia's college graduation was approaching. She had worked so hard, and I couldn't bear to ruin her achievement with a family crisis. So I made another decision. I would wait, but I wouldn't be idle during that time. I would prepare myself for whatever came next. The morning of Sophia's graduation dawned bright and clear, the kind of perfect May day that seemed to mock my inner turmoil. I rose early, as I always did, to prepare breakfast for the family. Michael had flown in from California the night before, where he was in his 2nd year of medical school. Having both my children under one roof again brought a momentary joy that helped me push aside the anxiety about what I knew would happen later. I made Richard's favorite breakfast, blueberry pancakes and crisp bacon. He came downstairs in his expensive suit, barely acknowledging me as he checked his phone continuously. I wondered if he was texting Natalie, coordinating their plans for the day. The thought made my hand shake slightly as I poured his coffee. "Big day," I said, trying to maintain normalcy for the children's sake. Richard grunted in response, not looking up from his phone. Michael bounded down the stairs, bringing energy into the room. "Mom, these pancakes smell amazing. I've been living on ramen and coffee for weeks." Sophia appeared last, already dressed in the outfit she'd wear under her graduation gown. She looked so grown up, so accomplished. I felt a surge of pride that momentarily pushed aside all other emotions. "My graduate," I said, hugging her tight. "I can't believe this day is finally here." As I held my daughter, memories flooded back. Sophia learning to read, winning the science fair in 5th grade, being accepted to Boston University. I had been present for every milestone, every triumph and disappointment. Richard had missed many of them due to work commitments, or so I had believed. After breakfast, I excused myself to get ready. In our bedroom, I opened my closet and bypassed the conservative navy dress Richard had expected me to wear. Instead, I pulled out a new outfit I'd purchased secretly, a stylish red dress that fitted my figure perfectly, complemented by a cream-colored jacket. I'd also visited a salon the day before for a new haircut that framed my face beautifully and covered the gray I'd previously let show. When I came downstairs, Richard did a double take. "That's not what I thought you were wearing," he said, disapproval evident in his tone. "I decided I wanted something special for today," I replied calmly, noting how his reaction confirmed what I already knew. He had hoped I would fade into the background. The drive to the university was tense. Richard drove while I sat beside him, Michael and Sophia chatting in the back seat. I gazed out the window, mentally rehearsing what I would say and do when the moment came. The envelope in my purse felt heavy with significance. We arrived at the university and found parking. The campus was bustling with excited families. We met my sister Janet and her husband, along with Richard's brother Thomas and his wife. As we waited for the ceremony to begin, I noticed Richard step away, phone in hand. From where I stood, I could see him smiling at the screen in a way he hadn't smiled at me in years. Then I saw her. Natalie was lingering near the entrance to the auditorium, pretending to check her phone. She was stunning, tall, slender, with glossy dark hair and the confidence of youth. She wore a form-fitting green dress that made her look like she belonged on a magazine cover. My heart constricted painfully at the sight of her, but I forced myself to breathe evenly. This day would not be ruined for Sophia. Before we entered the auditorium, I had a moment alone with my daughter. "Mom, is everything okay?" Sophia asked, her intuition picking up on the undercurrents. "Dad seems weird today." I took her hands in mine. "Today is about celebrating you and all you've accomplished. Nothing will ruin that, I promise." She studied my face, seeming to sense something significant was happening. "You look beautiful, Mom. Really beautiful." "Thank you, sweetheart," I replied, blinking back tears. "Let's go find our seats." That morning, before anyone had awakened, I had prepared the envelope. Into it, I had placed several items with great care, documents that represented months of quiet preparation and the beginning of my new life. The envelope now sat in my purse, waiting for its moment. The auditorium was filled with the buzz of excited families when we took our seats. I sat between Richard and Michael, with Janet and Thomas's families in the same row. I noticed Richard scanning the crowd, and I knew exactly who he was looking for. Sure enough, when I discreetly glanced back, I saw Natalie sitting about 7 rows behind us. She quickly looked away when she caught me looking. The ceremony began with speeches from the university president and the dean. Under different circumstances, I would have been fully engaged in these talks about future potential and new beginnings. Instead, I found myself reflecting on endings and betrayals while maintaining a serene expression. The graduates filed in a sea of caps and gowns. I strained to spot Sophia among them, my heart swelling with maternal pride when I finally saw her. She had decorated her cap with "thank you" in glitter letters, a message to all who had supported her journey. "There she is," I whispered to Michael, pointing discreetly. "I see her," he replied, grinning broadly. Richard nodded but said nothing. His attention seemed divided between the ceremony and something, or someone, behind us. The commencement address was given by a renowned neurosurgeon who spoke about perseverance and integrity. The irony wasn't lost on me, as I sat next to a man who had abandoned both qualities. I straightened my spine and lifted my chin, embodying the dignity the speaker advocated. Finally, they began calling graduates' names. We waited through dozens of names until they reached the W section. As Sophia Wilson echoed through the speakers, we all rose to our feet. I clapped until my hands hurt to tears of pride streaming down my face. Sophia crossed the stage with confident strides, accepted her diploma, and moved her tassel from right to left. She looked toward our section and waved. It was at that perfect moment, my moment of purest joy, that Richard leaned close to my ear and whispered the words that he thought would devastate me. "I'm leaving you," he said, his voice cold and final. My heart hammered against my ribs. Though I had known this was coming, hearing the words sent a physical shock through my body. My hands trembled slightly, but I kept my expression composed. I would not let him see me crumble. I would not let him steal this moment from Sophia or from me. I turned to look at him directly. His face held no remorse, only impatience, as if he was annoyed to have to deal with this inconvenience. Behind his expression, I detected relief and even a hint of smugness. He was confident I wouldn't make a scene, that my lifelong habit of putting others first would continue even now. Richard's eyes darted back toward where Natalie sat. The slight nod he gave her confirmed what I already knew. They had planned this ambush together, choosing my daughter's graduation as the setting for maximum control over my reaction. In that moment, 35 years of memories flashed through my mind. Our wedding day, the birth of our children, building a home together, supporting his career, the sacrifices I had made. I thought about the woman I had been before Richard, the dreams I had set aside, the parts of myself I had diminished to make space for his ego and ambitions. But I also thought about the last 6 months, the quiet strength I had discovered in myself, the plans I had made, the future I had begun to envision on my own terms. Richard expected tears, pleading, perhaps even a scene. He didn't know that the woman he had married was gone, replaced by someone much stronger. I simply nodded and turned my attention back to the stage. This calculated non-reaction clearly unsettled him. I could feel his confusion without looking at him. He had expected pain drama weakness. My calm acceptance was not in his script. The ceremony concluded with the turning of tassels and tossing of caps. As we filed out of our rows, Richard kept glancing back at Natalie, who was making her way toward the exit. I focused on finding Sophia in the crowd of graduates. When we finally spotted her, the family gathered for photos. Richard stood stiffly beside me, checking his watch repeatedly. I positioned myself confidently next to my daughter, my arm around her waist, smiling genuinely for the camera. These photos would not show a broken woman. "Can we hurry this up?" Richard muttered to me. "We have dinner reservations." I raised an eyebrow. "We certainly do. The whole family is expected." As more relatives arrived to congratulate Sophia, Richard grew increasingly agitated. Then, with breathtaking audacity, he waved Natalie over to join our group. "Everyone, this is Natalie Parker, my colleague," Richard announced. The word colleague hung in the air, its inadequacy obvious to me, but perhaps not to others. Sophia looked between her father and the young woman, then at me. Her brow furrowed slightly, her intuition telling her something wasn't right. I squeezed her hand reassuringly. "We should head to the restaurant," Richard announced to the group. "I have something important to discuss with everyone." As we walked toward our cars, Sophia fell into step beside me. "Mom, what's going on?" she whispered. "Your father has made some decisions," I replied quietly. "But today is still your day, and we're going to celebrate you properly. Trust me, everything will be okay." She searched my face, finding not despair, but determination. She nodded slowly, still concerned, but willing to trust me. I touched the outline of the envelope in my purse. Richard had set the stage for his grand announcement, but he had no idea that I was prepared to change the script entirely. The restaurant Richard had chosen was upscale and elegant, a fitting venue for a graduation celebration, but also, I realized, a public setting where he thought I wouldn't cause a scene. Our reservation was for 20 people, immediate family, some cousins, and Sophia's godparents. The staff had arranged a long table in a semi-private area toward the back. I noticed immediately that Richard maneuvered the seating so that Natalie was beside him while I was placed several seats away. Michael, observing this, frowned and switched place cards to sit protectively next to me. My sister Janet, always perceptive, raised her eyebrows questioningly. I gave her a slight nod that said, "Yes, it's exactly what you think." Appetizers were served and champagne was poured. Conversation flowed around the table as family caught up with one another. Sophia was the center of attention, fielding questions about her future plans to pursue a master's degree in environmental science. I participated in the discussion, smiling and engaging, despite the knot in my stomach. Richard barely touched his food, drinking champagne quickly and growing more emboldened with each glass. He and Natalie exchanged glances throughout the meal, their involvement obvious to anyone paying attention. I saw confusion and disapproval dawning on several family members' faces. Sophia was becoming increasingly uncomfortable. Her special day was being tainted by the strange tension, and I could see her struggling to maintain her happiness. This, more than anything, strengthened my resolve to handle what was coming with dignity and strength. As the main course was being cleared, Richard tapped his glass with a fork, standing to address the table. The conversation died away, and all eyes turned toward him. "I want to thank everyone for coming to celebrate Sophia's achievement today," He began, his voice carrying the practiced confidence of a man accustomed to commanding attention in boardrooms. It's a milestone that marks a new chapter in her life. He paused, taking another sip of champagne. And speaking of new chapters, I have an announcement to make. Life is short, and sometimes we have to make difficult decisions to find happiness. The atmosphere around the table shifted perceptibly. I sat straighter, my hand moving to my purse where the envelope waited. Barbara and I have had many good years together. Richard continued, not looking at me. But people grow apart. I've decided it's time for me to move on to a new chapter in my life as well. Shocked murmurs rippled through the gathering. Sophia's face had gone pale. Michael's hand found mine under the table and squeezed hard. Before Richard could continue, I stood calmly. All eyes shifted to me, including Richard's, which narrowed with annoyance at the interruption. I believe I should respond to this, I said, my voice steady and clear. First, I want to say that this is Sophia's celebration, and I apologize that it's being overshadowed. I turned to look directly at my daughter. You have made us so proud, and nothing can diminish that achievement. Then I faced the table again. For those wondering, yes, Richard has just announced he's leaving our marriage of 35 years. What he hasn't mentioned is that he's been having an affair with Natalie. I gestured toward her, who, as you can see, is not merely a colleague. Natalie had the grace to flush red. Richard's jaw tightened with anger. I've always believed in loyalty, family, and respect, I continued. These values have guided my life and the way I raised our children. When those values are betrayed, we each have choices about how to respond. I turned back to Richard. Thank you for finally being honest, Richard, even if your timing leaves much to be desired. I appreciate you making this announcement public, as it saves me the trouble of explaining the situation to our family and friends. Richard's expression wavered between anger and confusion. This was not the reaction he had anticipated. Since we're being honest, I said, reaching for my purse, there's something I'd like to share with you as well. I removed the envelope and held it for a moment, feeling its weight, not just physical, but symbolic. Then I extended it toward Richard. What's this? He asked, his tone suspicious, but tinged with the arrogance of a man who believes he still holds all the cards. Some kind of plea to reconsider. I didn't respond, simply continuing to hold out the envelope until he took it. The table had gone completely silent, all eyes riveted on this unexpected development. Richard took the envelope and began to open it, a smug expression suggesting he was humoring me before continuing with his plans. As he pulled out the contents, his expression changed rapidly from smugness to confusion to shock. What the hell is this? He demanded, his voice rising as he flipped through the papers and photographs. That, I replied calmly, is evidence that I've known about your affair for months. The top photos are from the private investigator I hired after finding too many unexplained hotel charges and late nights at the office. The documentation beneath is more interesting. Financial records, property deeds, business valuations, and a very comprehensive accounting of our marital assets prepared by a forensic accountant. Richard's face had gone from red to white. His hands were shaking now, causing the papers to tremble visibly. You had no right to access these documents. He sputtered, his composure cracking. Actually, I had every right, I corrected him. I'm your wife. Remember, most of those accounts are joint, and I've been signing tax returns alongside you for 35 years. The forensic accountant simply helped organize what was already legally accessible to me. Richard's eyes darted to Natalie, whose expression had shifted from embarrassment to uncertainty. She clearly hadn't expected this turn of events. You're trying to ruin me, Richard accused, his voice rising to a near shout. No, Richard, I said, my voice remaining steady. I'm protecting myself from your attempt to ruin me. There's a difference. He rifled through the papers more frantically, now stopping at a letter on legal stationery. As he scanned its contents, his face contorted with fury. You've been meeting with divorce attorneys, he practically screamed. Behind my back. Yes, I acknowledged. For about 5 months now. Unlike you, I believe in being prepared. By now, several family members had stood up and moved away from the table with Sophia shielding her from the worst of the confrontation. Michael remained steadfastly by my side, his presence a silent support. Richard was now frantically checking each document, his composure completely shattered. "This can't be legal. You can't do this to me." "It is, and I can," I replied simply. "Just as you thought you could walk away from 35 years of marriage with your young girlfriend and leave me with crumbs. The difference is, I have facts, evidence, and the law on my side." Richard lunged forward, grabbing my arm. "You vindictive bitch! You planned this all along." Michael immediately stepped between us. "Take your hand off my mother," he said, his voice low but dangerous. Richard released me, seeming to suddenly remember we were in a public place with witnesses. He turned back to the documents, his breath coming in short, angry bursts. "We'll see what my lawyers have to say about this, he threatened. "Yes," I agreed. "We certainly will." I remained standing, addressing everyone at the table while Richard continued to frantically review the documents. "For those wondering what exactly is in that envelope," I said, my voice steady, "I'll explain. When I confirmed Richard's affair, I didn't just cry and wait to be discarded. I took action to protect myself and our children's inheritance." Richard's head snapped up at this, his eyes wide with growing panic. "The envelope contains photographic evidence of Richard's affair with Natalie, which has been going on for over a year," I continued. "It also includes documentation of assets Richard tried to hide from me during our marriage. There are records of accounts in the Cayman Islands. He thought I didn't know about properties purchased through shell companies and investments he kept off our joint financial statements." I looked directly at Richard. "Did you forget that I was the one who helped you apply for your first business loan? That I was the one who supported you through your MBA while working full-time and raising our infant daughter? That my name is on the original documents for what became your company's first major acquisition?" Richard's face had lost all color. He stared at one particular document, his hands shaking visibly now. "The envelope also contains proof that I contributed to building his success every step of the way," I continued. "Loans from my teacher's pension to help start his first independent venture. My signature as guarantor on the mortgage for his first office building. Documentation of the inheritance from my father that provided capital during the recession when his business was struggling." Natalie was now staring at Richard with an expression of dawning realization. This was clearly not the wealthy, powerful man she thought she was getting. "The legal papers outline that Massachusetts is an equitable distribution state, meaning that the court will divide marital assets fairly based on multiple factors, including length of marriage contributions of each spouse and future earning potential. Given that I sacrificed career advancement to support Richard's career and raise our children, the court typically views that very favorably." I paused watching as Richard turned to the final document in the package. "But perhaps most shocking to Richard right now," I said, "is the letter from my attorney explaining that 6 months ago, I discovered Richard was planning to sell his shares in the company to a competitor and hide the proceeds. So I used my own savings and took out a loan to quietly buy out 2 of his 3 business partners. As of last week, I control 40% of the company board votes, not enough to force decisions alone, but certainly enough to block any asset stripping or suspicious transactions." At this revelation, Richard let out a strangled noise, somewhere between a gasp and a scream. "You can't do this. The company is mine. I built it. We built it," I corrected. "And your remaining partner, Gordon, was quite interested to learn about your plans to sell out from under him. He was very appreciative when I showed him the evidence and quite happy to align his voting shares with mine going forward." Richard lunged toward me again, but Michael and Thomas quickly moved to restrain him. "You'll regret this," Richard hissed, his face contorted with rage. "No, Richard," I replied calmly. "The only thing I regret is not recognizing your true character sooner." I noticed that Natalie had slipped away during the confrontation, clearly reassessing her future with a man whose financial empire was now revealed to be partly mine and significantly compromised. Sophia had returned to the edge of the group, her face tear-streaked, but her posture strong. She stepped forward to confront her father. "How could you do this today of all days?" she demanded. "Mom has given everything for this family while you were, what, planning your escape with someone my age." Richard's anger momentarily faltered in the face of his daughter's disgust. "Sophia, you don't understand. Your mother and I have been unhappy for years. This isn't as sudden as it seems." "Save it," Sophia snapped. "I saw how she looked at you when you got home from trips. She was never unhappy until you made her that way." I placed a gentle hand on Sophia's shoulder. "This isn't how I wanted this day to go," I said softly. "I'm so sorry." She turned and hugged me fiercely. "Don't apologize, Mom. You're amazing." Richard was now attempting to salvage whatever dignity he could. "This isn't over, Barbara. I have resources you don't know about." "Actually," I replied, "the forensic accountant was very thorough. There's a complete asset tracing going back 7 years included in those papers. Any attempt to hide assets now would constitute fraud and contempt of court. My lawyer has already filed for an emergency injunction freezing all our major assets pending resolution." Richard's face twisted with fury as he realized how thoroughly I had outmaneuvered him. "You've been planning this for months while pretending everything was normal. Who's the dishonest one here?" he accused. "I've been protecting myself from what I knew was coming," I corrected him. "There's a difference between self-defense and betrayal, Richard. I suggest you consider that distinction carefully before you decide how to proceed." I gathered my purse and turned to address our stunned family members. "I apologize for this disruption to Sophia's celebration. Perhaps we should continue this another time when emotions aren't so high." As various relatives murmured their agreement and support for me, Richard made one final desperate attempt. "If you go through with this, I'll fight you every step of the way," he threatened. "I'll make sure you end up with nothing." I turned to him one last time. "Richard, you seem to be under the impression that you still have the upper hand. Let me be clear. If you choose to fight me in court, the documentation in that envelope will become public record. Every questionable financial decision, every tax maneuver, every secret account will be scrutinized by the court. Your choice." His face showed the exact moment he realized the full implications of his situation. The screaming rage transformed into silent, seething defeat. I walked away from the table with my head held high, surrounded by my children and family who looked at me with newfound respect and admiration. The week following the graduation was a whirlwind of activity and emotion. After the confrontation at the restaurant, Richard had moved into a hotel, and we communicated only through attorneys. I had arranged a meeting at my lawyer's office to begin formal divorce proceedings, and Richard had no choice but to attend. As I sat across the conference table from him, I was struck by how diminished he appeared. Without his arrogance and bluster, Richard seemed smaller somehow. His expensive suit couldn't mask the defeat in his posture or the dark circles under his eyes. Beside him sat his attorney, a sharp-looking woman who kept whispering in his ear. My own attorney, Margaret Lawson, was a formidable presence, a 60-year-old divorce lawyer with 30 years of experience and a reputation for fair but uncompromising negotiations. She had been a godsend these past months, guiding me through the complex process of protecting my interests while maintaining the moral high ground. "Let's begin," Margaret said, opening her folder. "We've prepared a proposed settlement agreement based on Massachusetts law and the specific circumstances of your marriage." Richard's attorney leaned forward. "Before we review any proposals, my client would like to speak privately with Mrs. Wilson." Margaret looked at me questioningly. I considered for a moment, then nodded. 5 minutes. The attorney stepped outside, leaving Richard and me alone in the conference room. For several moments, he just stared at me, as if seeing me for the first time. "I underestimated you," he finally said, his tone a mixture of bitterness and reluctant respect. "Yes," I agreed simply. "You did." He rubbed his face wearily. "Barbara, this doesn't have to be so adversarial. We were married for 35 years. Doesn't that count for anything?" "It counted for everything to me, Richard. That's why your betrayal hurt so deeply." He had the grace to look away momentarily. I know I handled things badly. Badly, I repeated. You planned to leave me with virtually nothing after I gave you my entire adult life. You chose our daughter's graduation to humiliate me publicly, and you brought your girlfriend, who's barely older than our children, to witness it all. Badly doesn't begin to cover it. Richard sighed heavily. What if I wanted to reconsider? What if I made a mistake? I studied him carefully. There was no genuine remorse in his expression, only calculation. He had realized that his comfortable life was about to become significantly less comfortable, and he was looking for an escape route. You mean now that you understand I'm entitled to half of everything and have legal leverage over your business decisions, you're wondering if you made a poor financial choice? I asked coolly. He flinched at my directness. It's not just about money. Natalie and I, things are complicated. Let me guess, I said. She was less interested once she realized you weren't going to be quite as wealthy as promised, or perhaps she didn't like being publicly exposed as the other woman. Richard's expression confirmed my suspicions. People make mistakes, Barbara. I thought I wanted something different, but maybe what I need has been here all along. The Richard of even a year ago would have had me wavering, hoping, believing. But that woman was gone. No, Richard, I said quietly but firmly. What you need is to accept the consequences of your choices. I've moved beyond anger now. I'm not doing this out of vengeance. I'm doing it because I finally value myself enough to demand what's fair. Before he could respond, I continued. For what it's worth, I hope you find happiness. But it won't be with me, and it won't be by taking what rightfully belongs to both of us. The door opened as our attorneys returned. The moment for reconciliation, if it had ever truly existed, was past. The meeting proceeded with the cold precision of legal negotiation, dividing 35 years of shared life into assets and liabilities. The days following that meeting brought a strange mixture of grief and liberation. I spent long hours sitting alone in our home, soon to be just my home under the settlement agreement, thinking about the journey that had led me here. The process of moving Richard out was a painful but necessary. He came when I was at school supervised by his brother Thomas to collect his personal belongings. Seeing gaps on bookshelves and empty spaces where his things had been brought moments of breathtaking sadness, but also a cleansing sense of closure. I had difficult conversations with both children about their relationship with their father. Michael was furious with Richard and initially declared he wanted nothing to do with him. I gently encouraged him not to make permanent decisions based on temporary emotions. He's still your father, I reminded him. What he did to me is separate from his relationship with you. Sophia struggled more with conflicting emotions, anger at her father's betrayal, but reluctance to lose him completely. I don't know how to act around him now, she confessed one evening as we sat on the back porch drinking tea. With honesty, I advised. Tell him how you feel, set your boundaries, but leave room for healing if that's what you eventually want. The house felt eerily quiet those first days alone. After decades of orienting my life around others' needs, the silence was both disorienting and exhilarating. I found myself rediscovering simple pleasures, reading late into the night without worrying about disturbing anyone, cooking only foods I enjoyed, playing music I loved without criticism. Friends rallied around me in ways that brought me to tears. My teaching colleagues organized a dinner group that met weekly. Old friends I had lost touch with during my marriage reached out after hearing the news. My sister Janet stayed with me for a long weekend, helping me rearrange furniture and create new spaces that were entirely mine. I received a surprising call from Gordon Patterson Richards' remaining business partner. I wanted to thank you, he said without preamble when I answered. For what exactly? I asked, confused. For exposing what Richard was planning. He would have sold the company out from under me, too. Your intervention saved all of us. This conversation led to a lunch meeting where Gordon proposed I take a more active role in the company's charitable foundation. You have excellent judgment and a strong moral compass, he observed. We could use those qualities. During my systematic review of our finances, I discovered additional evidence that Richard had been planning his exit for longer than I had realized. Hidden among tax documents was a consultation fee to another divorce attorney from nearly 2 years earlier. There were also emails discussing how to minimize his financial exposure in a potential divorce. Most shocking was a draft postnuptial agreement I found on an old laptop, clearly intended to be presented to me at some point that would have left me with a fraction of our assets. He had never found the courage to suggest it, perhaps knowing I would question why such a document was suddenly necessary. These discoveries reinforced the rightness of my actions. Richard hadn't just betrayed me emotionally, he had been methodically planning to betray me financially as well. Had I not taken action when I did, I might have found myself starting over at 58 with minimal resources. I made a decision to use my position in Richard's company constructively. During a board meeting I now had the right to attend, I proposed creating a scholarship program for women returning to the workforce after raising families or supporting spouses. The irony of using profits from Richard's business to help women in situations similar to mine was not lost on anyone, but the proposal was approved unanimously. The first holiday after our separation, Thanksgiving, loomed as a potential emotional minefield. Rather than try to preserve traditions that would only highlight Richard's absence, I decided to create entirely new ones. I invited friends without family nearby, some colleagues from school, and of course Sophia and Michael. We had a potluck dinner where nobody was allowed to bring traditional Thanksgiving foods. The resulting eclectic feast and night of board games became one of my favorite memories of that difficult year. Throughout this period, I received occasional updates about Richard through the children or mutual acquaintances. His life was not going as planned. Natalie had indeed left him when the financial realities became clear. His standing at work was diminished as rumors circulated about his ethical lapses. Most painful for him, according to Michael, was the social fallout. Many of our longtime friends had chosen to maintain relationships with me rather than him. I took no pleasure in his difficulties, but neither did I feel responsible for them. For perhaps the first time in my adult life, I was focusing entirely on my own well-being and future. The woman who had always put others first was learning, albeit late in life, to prioritize herself. 1 year after the graduation day that had changed everything, I stood in my new apartment overlooking the Boston skyline. The floor-to-ceiling windows flooded the space with morning light, illuminating the life I had carefully built for myself from the ruins of my marriage. I had sold the suburban house as part of the divorce settlement, opting instead for this modern apartment downtown. The decision had been both practical and symbolic, a clean break from the life where I had been a supporting character rather than the protagonist of my own story. My teaching career had blossomed in unexpected ways. With newfound confidence, I had applied for and received the assistant principal position I had once declined for Richard's sake. The role challenged me intellectually and professionally, giving me a sense of purpose beyond family caretaking. The journey to healing hadn't been linear. There were still mornings when I woke up reaching for a husband who was no longer there, evenings when the silence felt oppressive rather than peaceful. 35 years of marriage couldn't be erased or forgotten, nor would I want to erase the good parts. The children we'd raised, the life we'd built, the genuine love that had existed before it withered. Therapy had been a lifeline during the darkest days. My therapist, Dr. Melissa Chen, had helped me navigate the complex emotions of betrayal and rebuilding. "You're grieving multiple losses," she explained during an early session. "The loss of your marriage, but also the loss of the future you had imagined and the past you thought you had." This framework helped me understand why certain triggers could send me spiraling even months after the separation. Finding an old anniversary card, seeing elderly couples walking hand in hand in the park, hearing our song unexpectedly playing in a store, each instance reopened the wound temporarily. But the wound was healing, becoming a scar that marked me, but no longer debilitated me. I had learned to sit with painful emotions, rather than run from them to acknowledge them without being consumed by them. Support groups introduced me to other women with similar stories. The details varied, but the core experience of reinvention in middle age united us. These weekly meetings became a source of strength and perspective. Some women were years ahead of me in their journey, offering hope and practical advice. Others were just beginning, reminding me how far I had come. My relationship with my children had deepened through this crisis. Initially concerned about becoming a burden to them during my most vulnerable moments, I discovered instead that allowing them to support me sometimes created a new adult relationship dynamic that strengthened our bonds. Sophia had graduated with honors and was now pursuing her master's degree in environmental science. She called me regularly for advice, not just on practical matters, but on life decisions, valuing my input in a way that suggested new respect. Michael had moved past his initial fury at his father and established a cautious, limited relationship with Richard. He had recently brought his new girlfriend home to meet me, a significant step that demonstrated his trust in my emotional stability. My decision to maintain partial ownership in Richard's company had proven wise financially, but complicated emotionally. The quarterly board meetings meant occasional contact with Richard, who remained coldly professional during these interactions. I focused on my pet project, the Scholarship Foundation for Women Re-entering the Workforce after significant life changes. The foundation had already helped 15 women through education and career transitions. Each success story felt like a personal victory, a way of transforming my pain into purpose. One recipient, a 53-year-old former homemaker pursuing a nursing degree after divorce, had written me a letter that I kept framed on my desk. "You showed me that endings can be beginnings in disguise." Richard himself had been humbled by the experience. According to mutual friends, he was living in a modest condo, his lifestyle significantly less lavish than before. His attempt to rebuild his reputation in the financial community was an uphill battle, complicated by the whispers about his ethical lapses that had emerged during our divorce. He had reached out several times in recent months, tentative efforts at amends that seemed motivated partly by genuine regret and partly by the reality of his diminished circumstances. I responded with polite distance, firm in my boundaries, but free from the bitterness that had once consumed me. The most surprising development in my new life was my tentative step into dating again. At 59, I had assumed that chapter of my life was closed, but a dinner invitation from Gordon's brother James had evolved into occasional companionship that made me reconsider those assumptions. Dating in my 50s had produced amusing stories I shared with my support group. The man who spent an entire dinner talking about his ex-wife, the widower, who seemed to be interviewing for a household manager rather than seeking a companion, the well-meaning friend who set me up with her uncle because you're both single. But James was different, respectful of my independence, interested in my thoughts, comfortable with the complex history I brought to the relationship. We moved slowly, both carrying the wisdom and scars of previous marriages, neither needing to rush toward definitions or commitments. As I sipped my morning coffee, looking out over the city, I reflected on the strange alchemy that had transformed devastating betrayal into unexpected growth. I wouldn't have chosen this path, but having been forced upon it, I had discovered strengths I never knew I possessed. If I could speak to my younger self, that hopeful bride who had vowed for better or worse with such certainty, what would I say? Not to avoid Richard. Our marriage had brought my children, had contained genuine love amid its flaws, had shaped me in ways both positive and painful. Perhaps I would simply tell her that sacrifice should never mean self-erasure, that love should expand rather than diminish who you are. The woman I had become in the aftermath of betrayal was more authentic, more confident, and paradoxically more capable of genuine intimacy than the people-pleaser who had subordinated her needs for decades. The price of this wisdom had been steep, but the reward was a life truly my own. Trust your instincts. That was the lesson I carried forward. The inner voice that had whispered warnings I ignored for too long now guided decisions large and small. Sometimes the greatest act of courage is simply to listen to yourself. The envelope didn't just contain documents that secured my financial future, it contained my liberation. I didn't just save myself from a future of betrayal, I reclaimed the woman who had been there all along waiting to emerge. And to anyone facing what feels like the end of everything you've built, remember sometimes endings are actually beginnings in disguise. I wonder, have you ever had to reinvent yourself after a major life change? How did you find the strength to move forward? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more journeys of resilience. Your support means the world to me, and I truly believe that by sharing our stories, we help others find their way through dark times. Thank you for listening, and remember, it's never too late to begin again.